Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Yesterday I did a talk about the Sony Riccardo Muti Conducts Italian Masters box, and that got me to thinking that there may be a way to sort of address some questions some of you had and kill two birds with one stone. That question was, do some operas. When are you going to do some operas? Well, of course, it turns out that Riccardo Muti has a Verdi box on Warner. There's also plenty of Verdi in, oh my God, this thing on Sony, some of which is duplicative of the Verdi in this box. Is that like a story we've heard so many times before? We have dueling boxes. Well, the Sony box, wait a minute, the Sony box, this sucker, has all of that Italian music, plus it has a whole bunch of operas. I mean, by Cherubini and Spontini, and, there are reasons to get those for itself, but it also has La Traviata and Falstaff and Rigoletto and Il Trovatore, and this set has a Rigoletto and a La Traviata, but it doesn't have, as this set here, this one has a Rigoletto and a Traviata, but it doesn't have the Falstaff and the Trovatore. So there isn't too much duplication between them. I just want to make sure I got that right. I'm looking at these little cover things here to make sure I know what's in there. Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate and reasonably accurate. But, and this, of course, has the Verdi overtures that we talked about that were in the other box. But so I'm not going to deal with that huge box. We're going to be talking about the specifically Verdi box because it's more interesting, I think, to most of you who are into Verdi, obviously, and just a little bit more convenient and smaller. There are, let us see here, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 operas, which is a good chunk of Verdi's output, about a third of it. And you get the Requiem and the Four Sacred Pieces. And there's a DVD documentary in which Verdi talks about Muti. No, Muti talks about Verdi, which I can't watch these things. I find artists and what they have to say so uninteresting. I really do. It just makes me dislike them because most of them aren't very smart, and what they have to say is like, it's either not terribly insightful and boring, or it's one of those sort of, they say all of the, pretentious, pompous classical music culture snot lines about, the great spiritual oneness of it all. And, it just drives me crazy. I can't watch them. They're hagiographic bullshit pieces. So I didn't watch the DVD. We're only going to talk about the operas, about the actual music, because music is what matters to me, I hope to you, and the rest of it is the personality cult stuff I can't get into. One of the reasons, as I've mentioned before, that I hesitate to do operas is because everyone's got their favorites, and opera people are just as insane as the Bruckner people or the Albanese Iberia people. I mean, it's one of those little cult segments of the classical music world. The leader people, I mean, there are just so many of them in their little worlds. And when you try to get into their little world and make a few sort of general statements, they all start with, well, of course, Claudia Muzio in the 1932 blah, 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 and you just, there's just no winning it. You know what I mean? So one of the nice things about a big box like this is that I'm going to be very general. I'm not getting into, which Lady Macbeth's La Luce Longue was more Luce or Longue. These are going to be general comments about the performances, most of which are very good and very enjoyable, and about Muti in general in Verdi, and you can take it from there. There are some of these are going to be better than others because, as you know, Muti was by and large an EMI artist for most of his opera recordings, although some of them, as you can see, are over there on Sony. And he didn't actually favor his singers very much. His approach was one of strict textual fidelity. He was an or text guy. He band high notes and interpolated anything. I mean, that takes a lot of the fun out of opera for some of us. I mean, for me, I don't understand that approach. I mean, opera is a theatrical medium. These are not biblical texts, which is the way Muti treats them. And so a lot of opera people really dislike him. They dislike him for that reason. But on the other hand, he was a very, very serious conductor, nowhere more so than a Verdi. And his Verdi is as exciting as hell. I mean, generally speaking, he was a wonderful, wonderful conductor of that text. And the singers just had to toe the line. I know there are a lot of people who prefer that the interpretation be more singer-oriented, that it lets the performers either follow the grand Italian tradition of certain roles or certain things, or put more of themselves into the role. I think the best singers on these performances managed to do that while remaining within the parameters that the rather dictatorial Muti outlined for them. So with that said, I'm going to talk about the operas in the box, one at a time, in just briefly, so that we get a sense of what's in there, and you can get a sense of what you want, because it was very inexpensive. I mean, this is 28 CDs and a DVD, and it costs like $50, 50 some odd bucks. I don't know. It's not that. It's a great deal. I mean, it's just a great deal. And of course, the singers are mostly, those of the recent past, shall we say, generation. So you're not going to have wonderful historical singers. And there's another thing, and I just want to say this in the comments. Opera people like to talk about singers, female singers, not males, female singers, in the first person, which I find offensive. It's offensive and disrespectful to the singers, and it there's something creepy about it. It's, oh, Leontine, and oh, Maria, and oh, Joan, and I don't like it. Don't do it. Your comment will be instantly deleted if you do. I'm telling you now. So, we are going to speak about these people in the regular way, usually by last name, and that will be that. Sometimes first name if their last name's unpronounceable. I understand, but I don't want any. Well, I like Morella better than. I don't want to hear that stuff. I just don't. That's my thing. So I'm telling you now. You've been warned. Now let's start with these operas. Muti began with a bunch of opera recordings with the Philharmonia in the UK, and then he moved to La Scala, where he did a series of live recordings. And so that's where this stuff mostly comes from. But his early Verdi was tremendously exciting, terrifically exciting. Some found it somewhat unyielding, shall we say. But boy, he got it to move, especially in the early Verdi operas. He did exciting, exciting things. So we start with Nabucco, or Nabucodonosor, or whatever you call it. Now, I have to confess, I love this opera. I love it. I just love it. It's so much fun. I mean, the plot is completely nonsensical. It has, one of Verdi's greatest choruses, Va Pensiero, which was, at one point the Italian national anthem, Va Pensiero, solari dorati. It's just such a great tune. It's sort of the quintessence of wonderful, soulful Italian music, and it's got some incredible arias, especially for Abigail, who is actually Abigaile, it's Italian, Abigaile, who's the bloodthirsty quasi daughter of Nabucco, who finds out she's not really the daughter of Nabucco, who spends most of the opera either insane or going insane, or like I said, the whole plot's ridiculous. Anna Russell did a fabulous talk on Nabucco, and if you can find it's out there. It's available on CD. If you can get it, you should hear it, because it's quite marvelous. But anyway, so this has Matteo Maniguera as Nabucco, and Veriano Lucchetti as Ismaili. These are the Israelites versus the Babylonians. That's the story. And Gyarov is Zachariah, and Renata Scotto as Abigail. Now, Verdi met his eventual wife or girlfriend, or whoever lived with him his whole life, Giuseppina Strepponi, was one of the first Abigailes, and it's a voice wrecker of a role. And Scotto is, in a lot of these operas, she worked very well with Muti because, she was a thoughtful soprano. She was a Kunstdiva, as they say. She didn't have the most opulent voice out there. She got screechy as time went on, but she was a smart singer, and she was a great singing actress. And Abigail needs to be played by a great actress. So I find this performance to be extremely exciting, even without all the high notes. If you want those, there's that Sinopoli recording on DG with Gina Dimitrova, who has a voice the size of, well, she's from Bulgaria, and her voice is the size of Bulgaria. Just this huge, enormous, somewhat occasionally unsteady soprano that she just blasts away with. Very, very exciting. But this is also incredibly exciting. It's got a lot of work for the chorus, and those choruses really sizzle in this performance. So it's a terrific Abigail, why not? And it's got Elena Abratsova as Finena. She's the Russian soprano that was the student of Galina Vishnevskaya, but who was like a party animal, and Vishnevskaya publicly humiliated her. That's a big thing in opera, public humiliation between sopranos. So there's your soprano public humiliation story. Next, Ernani with Placido Domingo. It's an excellent Ernani. He knew that role. Mirella Freni as Elvira, and Renato Brusson as Don Carlo, and Nikki Giarov. They're all there. Giarov and Freni were husband and wife. Anyway, Ernani has got a plot that is so stupid, it's almost incomprehensible how silly it is. It's widely considered the greatest of the early Verdi operas, because it has wonderful, wonderful roles for the principals. They all have terrific things to do. It's probably his most sort of singer-oriented opera before Il Trovatore. And oh my goodness, the cat's up on the mantelpiece again. She jumped off, so I don't have to deal with it. And she says hello, by the way. So it's a very, very fine Ernani, absolutely first-rate Ernani if you're an Ernani person. It's not one of my favorite Verdi operas, if only because the story is so silly. It's about honor, and honor is what it's about. It's about people who do incredibly stupid things because honor for that reason. And that's about as far as I'll go with it. Next, Attila. I love Attila. First of all, I love Attila the Hun, that Attila. I love it because Attila is the good guy. He's a Hun, but he's the good guy. And I think that's awfully interesting. Attila also has the trashiest orchestral thunderstorm and shipwreck music ever in the history of the entire world. And I wish I could play it for you, because it's so bad, it's so screechy, it's so embarrassing that it's actually good. There's no reason to have a thunderstorm and a shipwreck except that Verdi wanted one. He did it because he could. And oh my God, it's such junk. It's just fantastic. And Attila also has that great line, where they're all negotiating with each other, and the Italian guy goes, "Oh, you can have every place else in the world, but leave Italy to me," which was a risorgimento rallying cry back in the mid 19th century. It had audiences going absolutely crazy. It was just fantastic. Anyway, it's a wonderful opera, and you've got Sam Raimi, Cheryl Studer, who could still sing in those days, Neil Shikoff, and Giorgio Zaccanerio. Those are your big people, and it's a great performance. It's the best one. That's it. If you want Attila, that's the version you got to get. Next, Macbeth. Verdi was such a genius. Even early Verdi was great. He was just great. I've seen Macbeth a few times. I saw Renata Scotto do Macbeth. This isn't with Renata Scotto. I saw her do it at the Met. It was that production that was reviled because of the staging. And I thought it was terrific. I really did. Anyway, the revised Macbeth, which is, of course, what this is a great opera, plain and simple. It's tremendous fun. It has La Luce Langue from Lady Macbeth. It's got her grand Scena Somnambulissima, her sleepwalking scene, which is one of the absolutely great scenes. It's got one of Verdi's best tunes in the prelude, and in that scene where it's going, it's the first opera that has some of that refinement that Verdi would continue to develop throughout his career, that you hear again in the prelude to Traviata and a lot of the other music, the death scene, and that would bear ultimate fruit in the gossamer textures of Falstaff. I mean, you first start to hear that, I think, in this opera. And you've got Cheryl Milnes, a great Macbeth. You've got Fiorenza Casotto, possibly her best recorded role as Lady Macbeth, and Ruggiero Raimondi and Jose Carreras, and what is not to love? It's a great cast. And I got to tell you, the big star, this is with the Philharmonia, with the Ambrosian Opera Chorus, one of the big stars of this performance are the Witches. The chorus of Witches, which Verdi takes at a clip that is unbelievable. I mean, they are supersonic witches, and those choruses are so freaking exciting. It's really just a blistering performance. The main competition, of course, is the Claudia Botto recording on DG with Shirley Verrett, which is equally good in a different way. So we're in great shape as far as Macbeths go. Next, Rigoletto. Well, this Rigoletto is a little bit controversial. I don't know if it's one of the best ones. Rigoletto's been recorded so many times. You've got Pavarotti and Sutherland on Decca. There's some great ones. I like Raphael Kubelik's, with Fischer Dieskau, which is, you might say, not the most Italianate of all the Macbeths, but a real thinking man's Macbeth. And that one has Renata Scotto, too, as Gilda. But here we've got Daniela Desi, one of her better roles, Giorgio Zacchinario as Rigoletto, and Vincenzo Lascola as the Duke of Mantova, and Pata Bercoladze as Sparafucile, one of my favorite characters in the opera. So, if you look, this is a conductor's Rigoletto, if you know what I mean. I mean, Muti is sort of the star of the show, and although I have to say, Zacchinario is a good Rigoletto, he really is. But if you like Verdi's orchestration, which really blossomed in Rigoletto. I mean, it's remarkably interesting just to listen to hear what he does and how he does it. This is a great performance because Muti is totally into the score. There's during the thunderstorm, there's the moaning chorus, which Berg used, sort of filched to do the chorus of snoring soldiers in Wozzeck, which is really fascinating. Verdi's imagination just took flight with this opera. And so I think it's a very well integrated performance in which, the singers all sort of subordinate themselves to Muti's overall conception. And I miss the high notes, some of them, but it's okay. It's all right. Then we get La Traviata. This is a famous La Traviata with Renata Scotto as Violetta, Alfredo Kraus as Alfredo, and Renato Brusson as Giorgio. Scotto is, shall we say, a little squally. But, La Traviata is an opera that thrives on sort of over-the-hill sopranos because, remember, she's dying of TB at the top of her lungs, as Anna Russell said. And, wrecked soprano voices doing Violetta only makes them sound more fragile. And some people think that, emotional. I mean, I think Ileana Kotrubosh and Kleiber's performance is still the one to go for if you're only having one, and she does not have a wrecked voice, but she's a smart soprano, and she sang it very well. And I spoke to her about it once, and, we had a nice chat about working on that recording, which she was very proud of, and rightly so. And but if you want it complete and, without cuts and without all that, this is, Scotto is a thinking person's Violetta in stereo, as opposed to, all those awful Callas recordings that everybody, suffers through to hear her Violetta. I can't listen to any of them, frankly. I think it's ridiculous to even waste the time. And then remember Beverly Sills did it too, but she was over the hill. I mean, La Traviata is the over-the-hill soprano role. The only one who wasn't was that first Sutherland, where you can't understand a word she's singing, but whoa, what a voice. And so, take your pick. I'm not getting into the La Traviata wars. I mean, you touch that one, at your peril. People just get hysterical about La Traviata. The only thing I could say, which is the redeeming feature of the La Traviata Wars, is that Kathleen Ferrier was an alto. I mean, can you imagine what we'd be hearing if Kathleen Ferrier had been a lyric soprano and had done La Traviata? We would be hearing it from the British critics endlessly about parting is such sweet sorrow and death and stuff and sweetness and spiritual luminosity. And oh my God, it would be completely intolerable. It's bad enough as it is. So, that's the one exciting thing for me about La Traviata. Next, I Vespri Siciliani. Wonderful performance here in the Italian version. There are only a couple recordings of I Vespri Siciliani. Nobody terribly likes it. It has two things in it that are worth mentioning, aside from, the bolero, Helene's, wonderful Hélène in the French version. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece. But you also get Verdi's longest ballet, The Four Seasons. It's a half hour, Four Seasons ballet, which is quite marvelous. And you can usually find it separately if that interests you. And the beginning of, I think it's the third act or the fourth act, I don't know which one, but it's the theme from Dragnet. Dum, ba-dum, bum, ba. That's it. It's the theme from Dragnet, sort of. More or less. But this is a wonderful performance, again, with Cheryl Studer, Chris Merritt, Giorgio Zaccanaro, and Ferruccio Forlanetto. The truth is that when these casts, everyone in opera, it's traditional to say, well, the modern singers aren't as good as the older singers, and nothing new is good, and everything that's recent is horrible, and all. These are probably the best casts that could have been assembled at the time for this music, and they're really good. They're very serious, hardworking singers, and like they said, if you're one of those opera people who talks about face, singers have to have face, and we like singers to have face. Face is a good thing, but these are conductor-led interpretations, and so the singers are supposed to accommodate to the concept. And, singers have been taught to do that these days, because of, the crazy, Regia Theater in Germany, where, they might set the entire thing in a nuclear power plant in Latvia. There's a conception, and the singers have to work with the conception, whether it's the directors or the conductors, and these are team efforts. And there was the one thing that always sort of struck me is there was a time when everybody praised the Skies ensemble performances. Remember, like the ensemble Rosenkavaliers, like Carlos Kleiber's in Vienna, and that was like a good thing. Or the Böhm, die Frauenschatten. Ensemble productions are good in German opera because German operas are symphonic and everything's supposed to work together. The pieces fit like a little machine. But in Italian operas, you want flaming individuality all the time. Well, one of the things that Muti and some of the other modern conductors showed is that Italian operas, of course, are ensemble operas too, and that they work that way. And the Sicilian Vespers, which is a grand opera, a super duper French grand opera, those are ensemble operas too. However brilliant some of the individual parts are, and however fabulous some of the arias, it's a machine, and all the pieces have to fit together. Next, this is one of the highlights of the discography, Un Ballo and Maschera, with Domingo as Riccardo and Martina Arroyo as Emilia. Now, Martina Arroyo, let us be clear, she didn't make that many recordings. She was one of the all-time great Verdi sopranos. A lot of people think she was better than Leontine Price. This is one of her few complete opera sets. There are only a small handful of them. I'm not going to count them up. But she is a great, great singer. She's a great Emilia, and it's wonderful to hear. Piero Cappuccilli is Renato, Ulrica is Fiorenza Casotto, nothing not to like, and Oscar is Reri Grist, who is absolutely fabulous. And those of you who only know her from the last movement of the Bernstein-Mahler 4 should really have a listen to her here. She's a terrific, terrific soubrette soprano. I mean, that's what she was, and it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But Arroyo, you got to hear it for Arroyo. She's just terrific. Un Ballo and Maschera is one of those Verdi operas that Mahler obviously filched some things from, like that huge dissonant pile up at the end of going into the recapitulation of the first movement of the second symphony, that crashing da 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 ba-dum 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 ba-da-da-da-dum ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da bum. Well, you hear it first in here in a sort of embryonic form, and you understand some of the theatrics that Mahler got from the Italian composers, Then we get La Forza del Destino with Freni, Domingo, Zaccanaro, and Dolores Zajic. Dolores Zajic is the best Preziosilla you've ever heard. Not that anyone cares about Preziosilla. She's the, sort of mascot of the military who sings Rataplan, the Rataplan chorus. And but this is a wonderful performance. Freni is excellent as Leonora. This is an opera that I've never particularly cottoned to because the story is so ridiculous. You know what happens. I mean, the only thing that happens in the opera is in the first act, which is Leonora's father gets accidentally killed. And so all of the other characters spend the rest of the opera doing stupid penitential things. And that's the story. And they chase each other through like the entire world. What's his name here is just Don Carlo is trying to get revenge for the death of Leonora's father, and Don Alvaro is running around trying to avoid his fate, and Leonora spends her life in a hermit's cave singing Pace Pace Mio Dio. It's just ridiculous. Don Carlo. This is thinking man's Verdi. This is, with Don Carlo, this is the 4-act Italian version. Remember, there are 3 Don Carlos. There is the 5-act French version, which can also be done in Italian, the 4-act Italian revision, and the mixed version, where you take the first act from the 5-act version and add it to the revised 4-act version. So the French version, the original French version, the one that sort of is the one that everybody talks about, is Abados on DG, which was sort of not terribly well recorded and glary digital sound, but I gather they've remastered it. Maybe it sounds a little better now. I haven't heard it in a while. The 5-act mixed version, the best recording of that, well, there were 2. There was Scholti's with Renata Tebaldi in one of her last roles. And there was Giulini's, which is still probably the one to get for the complete 5-act version. The other great 4-act version was Carillon's, which is absolutely thrilling. It's extremely exciting. And in the last scene, he adds extra tam-tam wax. What's not to love? It's a very red-blooded, dramatic performance, especially coming from Carillon. But so is this. This one has Pavarotti. Now, this was a famous production, this Pavarotti. This is the one where he cracked in his opening aria and got booed at the opening of La Scala, and everyone had a scandal, and it was all too... He's fine. He sounds actually really good in this opera. Daniela Desi as Elizabeth de Valois, and Luciana Dintino as Eboli. I don't think she's so hot, but, she the Veil song stresses her. And then, of course, Sam Raimi is a terrific Philip II, and the Grand Inquisitor is Alexander Anisimov. And, that's one of the great scenes. I don't know if this is, one of the best performances of it, but again, it's a thinking person's opera. It's a conductor's opera, and it's an exciting performance, even if all the singers are not, your favorites or mine. Finally, we come to Aida in the operas. There's more, a little bit more. Aida, this is a great Aida with Caballé, Domingo, Cazzotto, Capuccilli. It's fabulous. Nikolai Gyarov. It's one of the great Aidas. Absolutely one of the great Aidas. The Penguin people never liked it. They said Muti was unfeeling and metrical. And I think that's bull. It is an exciting Aida. And it is rhythmic. And I happen to like rhythm. I'm a percussionist. I can't help it. I just can't help it. The rhythm helps the piece. It's a great performance. Plain and simple. It's been a classic. The other classic Aidas, of course, were, Leontine Price's first one with Scholti, not so much her second one with Leinsdorf, and the old Zinka Milanov, which was which was quite wonderful. The Met Forces. That's the one that Opera News always used to recommend because it was the organ of the Met, so anything the Met did had to be the best. But that was a great Aida. Zinka Milanov was fun. So yeah. Now we get Verdi's Requiem as a bonus, and the four sacred pieces. The four sacred pieces are quite marvelous, and they feature Arlene Auger. And anything Arlene Auger did is very good. She was a wonderful, wonderful singer, and I loved her voice and I loved her artistry. But I mean, it's not like a huge thing for her to do, but it's okay. It's nice to have it. The Requiem is Muti's first, which means somebody who put this together was thinking. They were thinking, using the noggin. His second one was a live La Scala one from the same sort of time as some of these operas, and it was lousy. I mean, it was just lousy. It was dryly recorded. It was so uninteresting. I'm not quite sure what went wrong there, but the first one is a smoker, and they've remastered the sound. I don't know. I did a little A/B comparison. I think it sounds better in this version. It's just exciting as hell. I mean, the Dies Irae is the fastest ever. It's very fast and very slow, if you know what I mean. But the singing, I think, is terrific. It's got, it's got Renato Scotto, Agnes Balza, Veriano Lucchetti, and Yevgeny Nestorenko, the Ambrosian Chorus, the Philharmonia Orchestra. It's one of those. It was just one of those performances that really showed Muti at what passes for uninhibited for Riccardo Muti. I mean, he really is. It really lets it go, and it's exciting. It was in my list in my Verdi Requiem talk of the great Verdi Requiems. I've always loved it. It excites a lot of contrasting opinions, which is nothing wrong with a little controversy. So, in conclusion, and then there's the DVD that I don't care about. This is really a very fine Verdi box. It's a tribute to Muti as a Verdi conductor. It has some of the best casts you're going to hear today. There isn't anything about these performances that doesn't show a tremendous amount of care and love and dedication to the cause. And the early Verdi stuff is all as good as it's ever going to get. The more popular operas, of course, there's lots of competition, so you may have your favorites. But if you want a really good 11 opera Verdi box that gives you a wonderful sort of survey of Verdi's career, of course, Otello and Falstaff are missing. And, Il Trovatore is missing. That's in this thing, along with Falstaff. Then you could do a lot worse than to just pick up this box. You don't get any texts and translations. You'll have to find them elsewhere. That's easy. Everything is online now, if that interests you. Otherwise, one of the things I will say about these conductor versions, excuse me, I'm putting this away, of these operas, even Italian opera, which is supposed to be all, singers and all about boring rhythms and whatnot, accompanying, is that you can listen without following the words. I mean, they just make good listening, just to sit and listen to them, almost as symphonic. And I hesitate to say that because it's so against what these pieces are in a certain way. But it's also perhaps an indication of sort of the depth that we find in Verdi, that they work that way too. One of the things I've always said is that, classical music, people treat it as though, you do one thing, there's one slip, the whole edifice comes crashing down. It's so delicate and fragile. The classics aren't fragile. The classics are durable. They're strong. They can withstand anything practically that gets thrown at them. That's what makes them classics. It's that hardiness, that ability to be seen from a million different perspectives and interpreted in a zillion different ways. That's why it's great music. It's durability, not its fragility. So anyway, here's some seriously durable Verdi from Riccardo Muti. Keep on listening, folks. There's more opera to come in these conductor sets. This is a good way to get a lot of the repertoire out of the way right away, isn't it? Talk to you soon.